Hi. So I'm rewatching footage, and if you see any weird lighting changes or just like glasses glare, I am actively working against the sun. So that's what that's about. But I hope you enjoyed this video nonetheless. Bye. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Ashley here, and I'm going to be doing my February 2021 wrap up today. In the month of February, I read 12 books, most of which were romance, 3 of which were unplanned. I had picked up the Made in Blood Mafia Chronicles by Cora Riley at the start of the year, and I ended up reading books 2, 3, and 4 at the end of the month, which weren't planned. I enjoyed them, but they definitely made like my reading month a little bit more average. The first book I read was This Scott of Mine by Sophie Jordan. It's the 4th book in the series. I gave it a 4-star. I definitely really enjoyed this book. I love any like book where like it's placed in Scotland, just because I think it really, especially in historical romances specifically, it really brings like more culture into the book. There's definitely like a lot of talk about like Gaelic. There's like a lot of discussions about like cultural practices, like ancestors, history, and like just like the land, and I really like find that to be super interesting in the book. This one in particular, I found it like very fun because it discussed this curse that Hunt, who is the laird, his family was supposedly under, so he knew that he couldn't like have a child because all the men in his family are said to die before the birth of like their first child. So as much as he like wanted to get married, wanted to have kids, he knew that he could never like settle down in that way because he was trying to actively like break this curse and go against this curse. So that was like something that was like really huge for him. Then Clara ends up entering his life. She's a lady from like English society. She ends up staying with her brother because she was previously engaged, and she found out the guy she was engaged to wasn't like a great person. So to get out of it, she pretends that she had gotten pregnant. She is able to like break off her engagement like that, and she ends up moving to like Scotland. That way she could like basically protect her family's reputation, so what she had done wouldn't like affect her family. Hunt ends up learning about this and immediately, like without knowing the full story, wants to marry her because that would put him in a situation where he would be able to like marry like someone, actually like have a wife, have a child, and be a father, which is something he really wants, without like risking him dying of the curse. However, Clara was never actually pregnant, so it becomes like a huge issue. It does get brought up pretty early in the book, so I enjoyed that. Like, it's not like one of those misconceptions to like the last second, but I definitely think the part that made me not give it 5 stars was the fact that this curse was like a huge part of like the folklore in that town. Everybody knows about it, and it's brought up constantly, and the way that like the characters end up like swerving around the curse pretty much isn't really ever brought up to be like a loophole that would be a potential to get around the curse. So I thought that that was like very weird, because this has been something that's been happening to that family and like in that town for generations. At this point, you would think that it would get brought up in some way or form that the only way to break this curse is if X, Y, and Z happens, or this curse won't like come to be if X, Y, and Z happens. And that doesn't get brought up. So by the end of the book, when everyone's like pretty much like scrambling and we think like Hunt might like die, what comes to be was like shocking, but also kind of ruined like the stakes for me in terms of the book. So I wasn't able to enjoy it fully. I also just don't like when any characters lie that deeply about a situation, because I feel like Clara and her brother definitely were kind of like disrespectful of like the culture and like the beliefs of the town and like the clan, and that really like put like a bad taste in my mouth. And I also feel like if this curse would like fully come to be, it would be very like upsetting to me to know that she was well aware, everybody in this town is aware, and she basically totally ignored it because she wanted to do what she wanted to do. So that was really difficult, but I definitely really, really enjoyed the book. I think it was like a really great first read for the month, and I would suggest it if like you want to pick up any of the books in that specific series. The second book I read was Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women That the Movement Forgot by Mickey Kendall. It was absolutely amazing. It actually made me pick up a couple of books in the month of March. And I've read one so far, which is like Just Mercy, that talks about like mass incarceration and the death penalty. And I've put a couple on my like TBR, talking specifically about like how Black women and Black girls are treated in like education, just because I found this book to be like so interesting. And I really like the conversation of like motherhood and like Black girls in schools, and how teachers can bully like students, because that is something that I have experienced personally. And I thought those were like topics that don't often get brought up in these books about like race and injustice, that got brought up in this one, and I really, really enjoyed that aspect. I definitely think that if like you're looking to pick up any like books that are more like informational or discuss like race, like societies, like makeup or anything like that, that is an amazing book to pick up, and I would definitely recommend. After that, I picked up Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. In my policy course, I learned about the orphan like trains, and I was like absolutely devastated by it. I thought it was like really, really interesting to learn about, but like every moment of it makes you upset. And this book definitely made me upset. I found myself crying like a lot of times. I thought that it was like disgusting, because even though this is fiction, it's genuinely a historical fiction book, they bring up like the actual like woman who did this, Georgia Tan. I really like that aspect alone in the book, because I feel like in a lot of historical fiction books, when they're trying to establish like their own like twist on what happened in history, they don't often call out like these like specific figures, or if they do, they're like very distant characters in the scheme of things. Like you'll read books about, or I specifically have read books about like World War II, and you'll get like these characters that are set up, but they're so distant from the like main characters in the book that it almost feels like it's not like real. But the kids in this book interact very frequently with Georgia Tan, and also like one of like her workers, who is like a fictional character who's made up for this story. And it was just like absolutely devastating, really heart-wrenching. You see how much like these like families lost just because like they're poor, just because like they live in like rural areas, and just because like Georgia Tan was in the position and had the power to get away with the thing she was doing for so long. This book also made me put like a lot of books on my TBR, because I was like really interested about this, especially as somebody who's like currently studying to be a social worker. So I wanted to like learn more about Georgia Tan and read more books that are like nonfiction about the situation, because like it was a hard hitter. I definitely really, really enjoyed the book, but I found myself crying a good couple of times. Definitely like another 5-star read. Definitely suggest. After that, I read Lord of the Flies, because I told myself I would read more classics and more nonfiction. Classics in specific, just because like I don't read them often. And I am like trying to like close my like educational gap that I have from like elementary and middle school, where just like my school district and the school I went to in particular like didn't have like a lot of resources, so I did not have the opportunity to read a lot of these books. And the teachers that we got were often like newly licensed teachers who felt like they had a lot more freedom in what they could do in the classroom. So a lot of the time I just didn't read books that should have been required to read, because all my other like classmates as I went into high school and college read them in elementary and middle school, and I didn't. So Lord of the Flies is one that I picked up in the month of February. I gave it the 2 stars. I hated it. I thought it was so dry and so boring and like really, really annoying. And I listened to the audiobook for it, so it went by even like quicker, because it is like a short book. Like, it doesn't take long to read at all. But still, I just didn't connect with any of the characters. I found the boys to be like very unruly and very like kind of unreasonable. Like, there's a couple of boys who are supposed to be like logical in the group, and they're like often combating against these against these boys in the group who are like acting illogically. And it's supposed to be like this greater discussion about like society and how people tend to act when there is no true governance. Like, these are young boys, they cannot govern themselves, and in a very, very short period of time, they basically like fell into like mass chaos. And I thought that it would be at least like a little more adventurous, but it really does take place over such a short period of time that it just made me more annoyed at the boys than anything else. So I did not enjoy it. I definitely say that like if you want like a fast-paced kind of read and want to enjoy, like, understand where all of these references come from in terms of like Lord of the Flies, pick it up, but it's not my favorite. After that, I read Guarding Temptation by Talia Hibbert. I had picked it up for my birthday on Kindle because I really, really enjoyed her Brown Sisters series, and I wanted to pick up more writing by her because I know that that's like her first like traditionally published series, but she has a lot of work published before that. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5. It's not a 5-star for me because this is honestly, I think, probably one of the first like novellas I've ever read, so the pacing felt a little weird for me, but I like that they already had like an established relationship, although not romantic, so you definitely get to see like how much they had already cared for one another, how well they knew each other previously. They like definitely are able to take care of one another in a way that you would only be able to if you like genuinely knew the other person. At one point, like, I forget his name, but Nina and him are celebrating something that happened in like Nina's life, and he pulls up pretty much like all the stops. He does a bunch of things that like he doesn't particularly like, but he knows that she like really enjoys like eating specific food or like watching specific shows, and he does it because he like wants to celebrate her, wants to like comfort her, and it's like just like such a sweet gesture, and it was like really amazing. I also like how the setup of the plot really allows them to work through like a lot of their feelings that they were having for one another in a way that forces a close proximity and also forces them to actually have these discussions that are hard for both of them in different ways. And I found it to be like so sweet and so fun, and I have like 3 books bookmarked by her on Scribd. I will be continuing my Talia Hibbert read. I am forming a TBR for myself for March, so when I'm done with that, I'm hoping to pick up a couple of Talia Hibbert's like books. Then I read The Black Kids by Christina Hammond's Reed. I found that book to be like absolutely amazing as well. I gave it 5 stars. It's pretty much like a historical fiction book as well. It talks about like the Rodney King riots, where the main character Ashley, she's basically conflicted in how the way she was brought up is like pretty wealthy, and this allowed her to experience a lot of privileges while also having to face the fact that because she's black, people see her a certain way, and the only reason she gets these privileges are because of her wealth. And she really comes to like face the fact that some of her friends aren't like her friends for the right reasons, don't really acknowledge the fact that like she's black, and when they do acknowledge it, it's in a way that's very like microaggressive, definitely like negates how hard she works, how smart she is as a student. And in turn, we get to see like a lot of the ways that like trauma is passed generationally in terms of like things that have happened before, hate crimes that have happened before, and it was like really hard hitting. It was a difficult book to read for me just because almost like Before We Were Yours, where these things do happen and it makes it difficult to read, especially me as a person of color, because you see like so many parallels in your own life. And this book specifically was also really difficult because even like her friends who were white, and whether or not they meant well, the things they did were just honestly so hurtful that it made you extremely frustrated. Like, Christina really wrote in a way that no matter where you align on the situation, you'll feel like genuine anger. So I would also recommend that. Then I read The Beast of Bissick. I think it's Bissick. I looked it up. Still can't remember. But it's by Amelie Howard. It's the first in the Everly Sisters. I think it might be like a duology. And I thought it was amazing. I don't know what it is about me, but like, if you give me a historical romance about a scarred hero, I'm there. I'm absolutely there for that. And that's this book. The two of them I thought were just like amazing characters. You get Lord Nathaniel, but he goes by Thane, and her name, Lady Astrid. Both of them are like really just trying to deal with like a lot of backlash that they've had in like society. Him because of the way he looks and the way like he has learned to present himself, because people call him a monster because of how he has become starred after war. And Astrid because she is basically battling against her ex-fiance, I believe it is, and the lies he put out in society about her. And they end up basically forming this like relationship based off of the fact that they both kind of have like things that they need to battle against, and Thane only really agrees to it because he does feel like this like yearning when it comes to her. And I thought it was amazing. You get to see their like relationship develop, where it comes from a place of like convenience to actual like genuine love and care. And this was a book that there wasn't like a lot of misconception, but there definitely was like tension and like almost insecurity to the very last moments. And it was done in a way that was so well done for me that I just was not upset by it. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was very genuine, and I really enjoyed reading it. I'm definitely looking to pick up the second series in the book just because I'm very interested to see how it turns out, but we'll see. Then after that, I read Rebecca Witherspoon's Loose Ends series. So the first one is Rafe, a buff male nanny, and then I read Zini, A Marriage of Inconvenience. I thought these were both amazing. Rafe's like story, like him and I think her name is Sloane. Yeah, Sloane, like they have like an amazing relationship. Rafe is like really great with kids in general, but he like loves her daughters. She has like a lot of issues with her ex-husband, but she really finds like herself being away from her ex-husband and like establishing like her own relationship with her daughters, and just like being like this great single mom. And then when Rafe enters the picture, like the girls absolutely adore him. They want him to be like their father. They even say that like they like Rafe more than they like their father. And as you get to see like more interactions with like Sloane, and her ex-husband, you see that, like, he isn't, like, a great guy, and you kind of see why their, like, relationship fell apart. And you also see, like, the way he treats his daughters and how it's not always the best, and that's a good part of the reason why the daughters love Rafe so much. And I just thought it was amazing. I also love that, like, Sloane is, like, this baby genius, essentially, because it really shows how she fell into that relationship with her ex-husband and how much she feels like, not only as a black woman, but, like, a single mom and, like, a young doctor, she has to, like, battle against everything, and how, like, hard she has to work, and how her ex-husband was honestly just working against that. And I loved it. It was so great. I even love, like, all the background we get about Rafe and, like, his difficulties and, like, his battle with, like, grief. And even, like, that small little inkling we get about Rafe, I think, was, like, a really good setup for Zini, A Marriage of Inconvenience, because that book deals heavily with grief. The first book, Rafe, A Buff Nail Manny, was, like, a 5 stars for me. I thought it was, like, absolutely amazing. Zini, I gave it a 3 just because I think the pacing was a little off. I think it was definitely, like, very, very well done in terms of, like, characterization. I love the, like, relationship the two characters have with themselves, how that, like, develops, the relationships they have with their, like, families, and how they, like, are forced to work on that because of all the, like, feelings that come up after the loss of Zini's, like, aunt, who Mason, I believe his name was also very close to. And I just love that they both took the time to work on themselves as individuals before they really pursued a relationship, even though, like, they had to get married very, very quickly because of the setup of the book. And I also like that their relationship wasn't, like, traditional or, like, expected. Like, both of them didn't want children. They definitely, like, got married first thing, but then they, like, pulled back and, like, really came to learn about themselves so they could bring the best to the table. And I really enjoyed that. But I do think that a lot of the conversations that they should have had with their family were either very short-lived and should have been, like, a deeper conversation, or on, what's his name? I just remembered it. I know it starts with M. Mason. But on Mason's point of view, like, I feel like there was a lot of conversations he could have had with his father that would have given him better closure, even if things didn't resolve, like, happily, you know? But I love a good little family drama. And then after that, I read the Cora Riley, like, books that I read. So it was Bound by Duty, Bound by Hatred, and then Bound by Temptation. The highest rated book, honestly, for that was a 3.75 for Bound by Hatred, which is the third book in the series that is about Gianna and Mateo. The second book, which is the first one I read in February, is about Valentina, which is the Scuderi sisters' cousin, and Valentina's relationship with Dante, who's the capo for the Chicago outfit. I just felt like their book was very much so a fluffer, especially with how, like, the first book is set up in the series. Like, it's obviously we only want to hear about Gianna and Mateo from, like, what happens in the first book. So to pick up the second book and it was about Valentina and Dante, I just didn't understand it. I also just really felt like the two of them didn't really establish, like, a relationship. I didn't see at any point in time where they would, like, feel romantically, like, invested or involved with one another. I just feel like one day they basically were, like, avoiding each other, and then they would get angry at one another, and then all of a sudden they were, like, in love. And it just didn't feel very fleshed out to me. I definitely think that both of them had, like, a lot of grief that they could have, like, worked through that would have, like, bettered their, like, character development and bettered their like relationship for them to have those open and honest conversations, but those just weren't had. I gave it a 3 stars, but honestly I'm probably going to go back and lower it to 2, especially after reading the 3rd book, which was like the 3.75 for me. Mateo and Gianna's relationship I definitely think was way better done. I just think that Mateo's like moments that we get to see behind the scenes, you really see how he comes to want to like protect her. He really is like intrigued by her, but also like genuinely like cares about her, and how he like wants to be like with her. And you see how both because of the nature of like the culture and like society that they grew up in, being in part of this like organized crime world, he has to like almost calculate how to get her and how to be able to protect her. And because Gianna doesn't want to be a part of that world, she sees like all of these like calculations that Mateo's doing for her as a way to like control her when that's not what it is. But I love for them, you really see how they both kind of understand that the miscommunication they're having is because they need to work on themselves as individuals, and how Mateo needs to like show up for Gianna but also give Gianna that space to like grow, because he doesn't want her to change. He loves like the person she is, and like he feels like called to her because of the person she is. And I feel like because of Cora Riley's writing, she does get that opportunity to like be herself, and also like just come to terms with the fact that like as much as she might not like Mateo, she really like feels comforted by him, feels supported by him, feels protected by him, and how those like moments and those feelings really like participate with one another well, in a way that she's able to like finally like fall in love with him, admits to herself that she's like fallen in love with him, admits to him that she's fallen in love with him. And I thought it was amazing, especially because you see throughout the entirety of the book how much like Mateo like loves and cares about her. And I thought that was great. The 4th book in the series though was a huge disappointment. I gave it a 2.75, and honestly I feel like that is nice. I might lower it to 2.5, but it's Bound by Temptation, and it goes into Liliana's and Romero's relationship with one another. Liliana has been like obsessed with Romero since she was like a little girl, and she finally is like 18 of age and she like still loves him, and Romero like is starting to have like romantic feelings for her, is starting to see her as like a full-fledged like person because now she's an adult. And I just felt like that was a little quick. Especially because he's honestly seen her grow up, A, and B, because he has a sister who's her exact age, so I thought that was weird. Also, throughout the course of the first 3 books, you see that there is a really huge situation that happens with the Russian mafia, which leaves Liliana kind of like traumatized for a very long time, like nightmares, panic attacks, all just like the anxiety built up from like experiencing that situation. And she's like that for a very long time, but for some reason, while she started afraid of Romero because of that situation, all of a sudden like a flip switches and she's just no longer afraid of him. There was no real discussion as to why, which I thought was weird. I understand that like she loves him, but I definitely think that it was showing like a great level of trauma where there needed to be some kind of resolution for me. I couldn't just be like, yeah, but I still think he's cute, which is how it felt when I was reading it. I also think that this book in particular is definitely kind of like not a fluff piece like the second book with Valentina and Dante, but more so like a setup for the rest of the series and like the different branches of the series. Where okay, so my camera just went out of space. So basically what I was saying was that it doesn't feel like a fluff piece, but it definitely feels like it's only a setup. So a lot of their relationship, especially towards the end of the book, is like really messy and sloppily put together because it's like very, very high stakes because we are now starting to split into the rest of the series and the other like little spin-offs that the series like comes up with. And because of that, I feel like a lot of things that happened felt like unnecessary, felt very like last minute. I felt like they could be better handled and they weren't, and that really made me dislike that book in particular a little bit more, but also because of like the huge age gap and the nature of the relationship and how Romero went from one second just being like, oh, she's a little girl, to the next second being like, oh, well, like, she's 18 now, which I did not understand. So that was very difficult. I will continue picking up the like book series because, as you can see, back to back, I read 3 of them, even though I didn't particularly love any of them. But I really, really enjoyed the ride. I love the plot. I love the like fact that the huge catalysts and the huge conflicts really come from like the fact that it's organized crime. And I will continue it, especially because I heard that the spin-offs that come up later in the like series and later in like the story that's being built are way better than this one. So I will continue because sometimes I just want a messy little read. But I hope this video hasn't been too long. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to hear any of my other thoughts about books or talk books with me in general in the comments. But for now, bye and happy reading.